the next Messi. It's a familiar refrain often uttered towards every left-footed young player with a pulse, especially when they happen to be wandering the halls of Barcelona's famed academy, La Masia. It becomes an inescapable blanket of speculation, an impossible standard to live up to once it happens to be applied. It's one that serves as a crucible of sorts. It unmasks pretenders like the day after Halloween. Names like Bojan Krkic, Nicolas Ladero, even Luka Romero, who's not even 20, but it feels like he's already fallen flat against expectations considering he was the youngest La Liga player of all time. Even the right-footed Ansu Fati is now seeking redemption on England's south coast after a litany of injuries and struggling form. So step into this withering spotlight, Lamine Yamal, the next to be anointed, the next. And that perfection starts at the very beginning because he was born just 4 kilometers away from what is now the Spotify Camp Nou. How on earth did they get that lucky? 4 kilometers! He grew up in the town over in Mataró, and he would not be able to hide from Barcelona's scouts for very long at all. If he was able to hide for them for that long, I don't think they'd be very good at their job. While Messi signed that famous napkin when he was 13 years old, Lamine Yamal signed with Barcelona at less than half that age. At just 6 years old, he was already noticeably different. Jordi Rura is the former director of Barcelona's academy. He told ESPN about Lamine Yamal, when he was 6, we received a report from a scout in Mataró. He told us about this kid who was different to everyone else in his age group and recommended we follow him. That's 6-year-old me. I'm not even sure I could properly kick a ball, but Lamine Yamal was already playing in the youth at La Torreta at such a level that a Barcelona scout was like, I know this kid was born 6 years ago, but he's diff. Trust me, homie. And I just want to point out, to make you feel as old as possible, that this was all happening, this whole scout finding Lamine Yamal thing, in 2013 and 2014. You see, after that scouting report, Barcelona invited Lamine Yamal and some other youngsters to try out at their training ground, and they just put their trust in Lamine Yamal. They liked what they saw. And that trust paid off almost instantly, because in his second year at the academy, still less than 10 years old, obviously, he scored 56 goals in 30 matches. But of course, he is not alone in putting on these sorts of displays of brilliance at a young age. The history of football, of soccer, is full of players at U9, U12, U15 levels that are dominant because of certain physical gifts or certain technical tricks, but once physicality and technique levels out, their dominance fades. But for Yamal, that just didn't happen. ESPN also talked to Albert Puig, who coached Lamine Yamal at U9 and U13 levels. He echoed this. He said, what surprised me most with him is not that he was already a lot better than the rest of his teammates in both age groups, but that as time passed, rather than things balancing out, which usually happens, Lamine stood out even more. And if you want to stand out, you can get this Gaylong FC kit from Singapore thanks to Sengalo with the link in the description. They're the official jersey sponsor of this channel. They're an awesome company that links up with smaller clubs around the world to give you access to hard-to-find, authentic shirts from places like Zimbabwe and Bhutan and Singapore. I'm Gaylong International FC through and through, and you can be too, with Sengalo's link in the description. We really appreciate the work they do bringing these cool jerseys and kits from around the world to life. And thank you to them for sponsoring the channel. I like these kits. It became clear pretty quickly that Lamine Yamal was a potential star. I mean, you could probably tell that from the way that Puig, his coach, was talking about him. He just kept increasing the gap between him and the players he was playing with. And Barcelona hinted at this when Lamine Yamal was still very young, because Barcelona has an incredibly Barcelona-esque rule where if you live in Catalonia, which is of course the autonomous region of Spain that Barcelona is in, you don't live at La Masia. You just train at La Masia and go home at the end of the day. Lamine Yamal, of course, is from Catalonia, but Barcelona decided to make an exception to the rule because they wanted to control more aspects of Lamine Yamal's development. And just so you understand how recent all of this is, Lamine Yamal still lives at La Masia. And when they're talking about controlling his development, they're talking about your diet, your home life environment, even your sleep schedule to optimize your development. And as insane as that sounds, it's clearly working. Yamal would go on to score a ridiculous 357 goals in 244 matches in Barcelona's academy, almost always playing up in age, of course. And in no place was this more clear than right after his 15th birthday when he was added to the Juvenil A team, which is the top team at La Masia, the U19 squad. And Barcelona was not the only entity that was taking notice in Lamine Yamal's excellent youth academy performances, because Morocco was trying to poach him from the Spanish national teams, Morocco being the land of his father's heritage. And that was based just off of his performances at La Masia. But it's worth mentioning that Lamine Yamal's been loyal to the land of his birth, Spain. He's played for them at every youth level and maybe beyond. Ooh, teaser. YouTube fundamentals. Keep watching, please. And as Lamine Yamal was promoted to this U19 team for the first time, he was also picked alongside another handful of youth players by the senior team manager, Xavi, to train with the Barcelona first team and go on preseason tours and work out with the senior players and those sorts of things. So if you're thinking, wait, did that happen at the same time? Yeah, basically, he got promoted to the top level of La Masia and then promoted into training with the senior team while being in the top level of La Masia at virtually the same time. This was also the start of last season, so we're almost caught up, and that means we're in for a whirlwind of a year. Because this kid now is like the best Wonderkid in the world. But at the time, at the beginning of last season, it was not clear if Lamine Yamal was actually at the first team level or if his inclusion in training was just an indication to him and his camp that his future was with Barcelona. This was important for a couple of reasons. Because Lamine Yamal was only 15, he hadn't actually signed a professional contract yet. You have to be 16 in order for that to happen, and Morocco wasn't the only other entity paying attention. You see, big clubs were circling, and this is a problem Barcelona has had in the past. A youth player like Ilaix Moriba, who did initially sign a professional contract, but then forced his way out when he felt like there wasn't a pathway to the first team and signed a huge deal with RB Leipzig instead. This potential fear became exacerbated even more when Lamine Yamal signed with Portuguese super agent Jorge Mendes. So the inclusion in the first team training might have been a way as well to kind of sate the appetite of the super agent and avoid their wrath. In essence, it's, hey, Lamine, there's going to be a spot for you in the first team someday, but we don't know if that's right now. Which is fine, because, you're 15. It also felt very far away because he'd never played for Barcelona's B team, and especially in Spain, playing for the B team is just the direct path to playing for the senior team. Only Gavi in Barcelona's first team right now didn't play for the Barcelona B team at some point on their path up to the senior team. But come April, that just didn't matter anymore. You see, by the time we got into April, in a match against Atletico Madrid, an unfamiliar and yet unused name appeared on the team sheet. You'll never guess who it is. Number 41, Lamine Yamal. I could be a stadium announcer. I could totally be a stadium announcer. Shut up. The following weekend, he appeared on the team sheet again, and with the match comfortably in hand, 4-0 up against a 9-man Real Betis, Lamine Yamal came on the field to make his debut, aged just 15 years, 9 months, and 16 days. This set the record for the youngest player to ever appear in a match for Barcelona. That record was 82 years old, and Lamine Yamal nearly broke it by an entire year. He was more than a year younger than when Ansu Fati made his debut. And do you remember how much fanfare and hoopla there was around that? And what was perhaps most amazing is as the number 41 stood on the touchline ready to come into the game at the Spotify Camp Nou, the Camp Nou gave him a standing ovation. A 15-year-old. Not only can you imagine the pressure that puts on you, but you haven't done anything yet. That standing ovation is coming from sheer anticipation at the history that they were witnessing. And he nearly rewarded that standing ovation. He poached a loose touch off the back line and would have scored if it wasn't for a quick close down by the goalkeeper, but his liveliness and creativity was already on display. But that was it. A brief glimpse. It was his only appearance of last season, and even though it was a record-breaking appearance, it still wasn't entirely clear whether he was going to be a great player, particularly right away, because there is that significant collection of ultra-young players that break into first teams at remarkably young ages, but then struggle to carve out first-team places with those clubs down the line, Luca Romero being a very particular example that we've already used in this video. And perhaps his appearance was just an extension of the philosophy of appeasing his super agent and letting him know that he wasn't going to be the next Ilaix Moriba, that there was a plan to involve him in the first team down the line. After all, he subbed in the safest situation possible. Maybe the appearance was an endorsement of his potential instead of a statement on his current ability. But this season, all of those potential doubts were put to rest emphatically. The summer opened with 4 particularly amazing goals at the U17 Euros as he led Spain to the semi-finals. Then in August, Ousmane Dembele, the presumptive starter at right wing, which is the main position played by Lamine Yamal, was sold to PSG for relative peanuts compared to what he was purchased for. And the following day, literally the day after the sale to PSG was confirmed, Lamine Yamal made a 14-minute appearance off the bench in La Liga. The next match, he started, and then he started again, providing 2 assists in a wild 4-3 win over Villarreal. The best and most remarkable thing about Lamine is his football intelligence. He plays like nobody else. People class him as a winger. My bad. Sorry, I didn't mean it. But he can play whatever he wants. He's an all-around footballer, without a doubt. He's a wonderful kid with a great personality for a 16-year-old. He's a footballer in every sense of the word. That was Barcelona's former sporting director, Ramon Planes, and he would continue to be proven right. By September, Lamine Yamal had been called into the Spanish senior national team. He spent the summer playing at the U17 Euros. And of course, because this story is about just everything working out perfectly for an incredibly talented and well-grounded young kid in Lamine Yamal, he scored, obviously. He scored in a 7-1 rout against Georgia, becoming Spain's youngest ever goal scorer. He was just 16 years and 57 days old. This guy can barely get a driver's license in the United States, and he's already scoring for the Spanish national team. Domestically, he's gone from starting last season as a speculative inclusion in preseason training camps and, early season training to this year becoming an irreplaceable regular in the first team. He started the season playing in Barcelona's first 9 matches, and the last one, he scored. And guess what? It made him the youngest goal scorer in the history of La Liga. Oh, also, Barcelona is unbeaten, with him having appeared in every match so far this season. And Barcelona's strategy of early inclusion has also paid off. He signed a contract through 2026 with a release clause over $1 billion. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. It's easy to miss all these records here. He became the youngest starter in the Champions League as well. Now, there are points at which a Wonderkid's ascent to stardom typically stops or halts or plateaus. But for Lamine Yamal, none of that is happening. The speed at which he has become irreplaceable for Barcelona has made even the wildest projections of his potential seem modest by comparison. And this brings us to the toughest part of Lamine Yamal's situation: his future. Now, fortunately for Lamine, his coach, Xavi, was at Barcelona when Lionel Messi started to make his breakthrough with the first team. Xavi is understandably trying to deflect attention, but he is already being bombarded with questions about Lamine's usage with the first team. The Athletic has already written an entire article about balancing the desire of the fans to have Lamine Yamal play every match because he makes the team better, and the need to take care of him physically because he's still just 16 years old. Everybody's worried about another Pedri situation where he plays 72 matches in 1 year and then all of a sudden has muscle problems. But Yamal's age is essentially uncharted territory. This almost never happens. It's way below where Pedri was or even Lionel Messi was when they started to make their breakthrough in the first team. Lionel Messi arguably didn't reach the same first team prominence that Lamine Yamal has right now until he was 18 years old. Lamine is 16. He has it now. Now, the other concern is obviously the pressure, and Xavi has aggressively deflected any comparison to La Masia's greatest ever product. He's well aware of the kind of blistering glare that can shine onto a player. And the comparison is particularly poignant when you consider that Lamine Yamal's inaugural Champions League start was at Porto. Now, Barcelona hadn't played at Porto since 2003, when it went there for a friendly. It's a friendly nobody would have cared about if it wasn't for the fact that was the first time that Lionel Messi appeared for Barcelona's senior team. Because of course it was. Now, if you want to read more about where Lamine Yamal came from and his background, ESPN has a brilliant article about that. The Athletic does an excellent breakdown of his usage now and going forward, and every article we used for this video in research is linked in the description for you to check out. If you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe, and if you want to keep binge watching videos, then you can check this one out. It's about the insane rise of Ange Postecoglou. It's even more insane than you think. The dude was in Japan 4 years ago. Like coaching. He wasn't just like hanging out. He was coaching, I promise.